Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle with the Sleep Coach School, and we're back today for another open class. This is open class 139, and I am joined by Beth. Hi, Beth. How you doing?
Hi, Michelle. Good to see you.
Oh, and I noticed you put Coach Beth today in StreamRide, which is perfect. And so I should refer to you as Coach Beth because you're
Yeah.
a coach. It's really great. I'm
Yeah.
happy to see that.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so let's see what sort of questions we have for us today. All right, let's pull them up. All right, our first question is from Udhayanithi, and he says, "It feels so great to be back here. My sleep got so much better. One thing that worries me whenever I search for insomnia on Google is it tells me that treatment can help, but this condition can't be cured. This statement makes me anxious, and it brings back my old memories. What are your thoughts on it? Anyway, my sleep got much better with some ups and downs, and also I don't care much about my sleep more. Finally, I need to stop Googling." Well, first of all, welcome back. And I know that I had received a question from you probably just over a month ago. So I just want to say I'm really glad that you're doing so much better. That's really great to hear. And with that, I want to pass it over to Beth. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, this is I love this short little question because it's so relatable. Because who of us in insomnia land hasn't sort of fallen into the Google trap? You know what I mean? Of wanting to research. And, this makes so much sense. And I did a ton of researching I was researching before there even was Google, when it was checking out library books over and over or getting on the list for the book. I mean, the whole thing. And, so this is totally understandable. And, I think that when I was doing all that research, what we're looking for is like hope, hope and a solution and something that can help us. So not unusual at all to go down the Google road. Um, as far as Google's statement about not having a cure for the condition, I just flat out disagree with that, because I don't view insomnia as a condition or a diagnosis. I view it more as a fear and the body's response to a fear. And I don't even really view it as dysregulated or maladapted. I think that it's more just protective. Your body's just trying to protect you. And then over time, it can become a conditioned response and become a bit misguided, but that's okay, because, that's unlearning the fear is probably what, we would consider as the cure. So I think with Google, I love that you answered your own question here at the end. Finally,
This is the last hurdle is not Googling anymore.
Yeah, I think that's just just doing a Google detox and taking that action of pulling away from Google sends a really powerful message to the brain that you're willing to let go of some control over sleep, and maybe let go of some of that identity. And there's going to come a time where you will be able to read that, and it'll just bounce right off. Like it won't even won't phase you at all to read it, because you have such. I mean, I think that what you're learning here in these teachings is really very revolutionary in the sleep universe. This isn't really prevalent on Google yet, so I think it's going to take a while for the world to catch up. So yeah, I just think eventually the statement will just bounce off, and doing a Google detox would be probably really helpful. So just like you said. So what are your thoughts on it, Michelle?
I agree. Google detox is a great idea for anybody out there who's deep down the rabbit hole Googling for sleep. Because like you said, like this information is not in the mainstream yet.
Yeah.
All of the mainstream information on sleep and insomnia is really skewed, and a lot of it's really inaccurate, and it's just not helpful. And so you're going to run across lots of stuff like this where it's talking about insomnia like a condition that can't be cured. And that made me almost think that they were referring to it as like a medical condition or like a disease, right? Because that's
Yeah.
what, when you hear the word cured, that's really where my brain goes. And so, it's just like Beth said, like, absolutely not. This is not a medical condition or disease that you need to be cured, that, cannot be cured. It's really all about fear and anxiety and what's going on in your mind. And that's something that we can completely recover from and move on from. And I agree. I think one day, you might even go onto the internet and see this and even kind of laugh at that a little bit,
Hmm.
right? You laugh, you roll your eyes, and you're like, okay, because you know better and you've had such a different experience. So
Yeah.
I love Beth's advice of just maybe take some time away from Google, just like you yourself have had that intuitive feeling, and
Hmm.
give it time, and eventually more of the information here is going to be, I think, in the mainstream. But I think
Yeah.
it'll take a while. It usually does. There's usually a huge delay with things like
Hmm.
this, but we're working on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just wanted to add that, people do recover from insomnia all the time.
Yeah.
They do recover from insomnia. And it, like, also, if you're really feeling like sometimes it's just this urge to just, do something, as listening to testimonials can be part of the healing, you know, it really can. Like, listening to the people that have recovered from it, is a good way to research a little bit, if you feel that need.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and Beth and I are proof of this.
Yep. Yep.
I had insomnia for 5 years. Beth had insomnia for 40 years.
Yep.
And
Long time.
both have completely recovered. We don't use the word cured because it just doesn't really make sense because we don't view it as a condition, but we both feel completely recovered.
Yeah.
And would you even say, I like the word immune? Like, I feel immune. I just know I'm never going back there. Do you feel that way too?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
I do remember reading those kinds of statements about, but in having that reaction of feeling like, oh no, I do remember. And now I just look at that and read it and just, it doesn't, no phasing at all. So
same. And
yeah.
I think it's damaging that so much mainstream information, it's unintentionally causing a lot of
Yeah,
stress and anxiety. There's a lot of fear mongering. And
it
so
is.
it's creating, again, even more fear. It's
Yep.
building our fear, which is
Yep.
the very thing we're working to try to come out of. So
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that that's the case. And
Yeah.
that's why this channel exists, to try to counteract a little bit of that. But just to know that I love your idea of maybe watching some of the success stories and
Mhm.
testimonials, so that
Yeah.
you see that there are lots and lots of people
Yeah.
that completely recover from this. So if you're interested, go ahead and check the success stories playlist underneath this channel, and there's tons of them there that you can check out for lots of proof, because our brain loves to see some proof. So
Yes. Yes.
right.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I hope that helps. And once again, I'm happy that you're doing so well with your sleep. That's great. So let's check out our next question. Our next question is from Phonovan, and he says, "Hi, really appreciate the channel. I've been having an issue of waking up earlier than normal before school for the past 3 weeks or so. At first, I thought this was a one-time problem, but after having it happen so consistently, I've realized that it probably isn't. It's strange because I wake up around 6.5 hours after going to sleep and feel refreshed at first, but then begin to feel exhausted, but cannot fall back asleep. And it always happens before school. It disappears on the weekends. It's frustrating because it feels like my brain is choosing to be tired, and it's damaging to my well being and making me worried about my health or whether or not I will be able to function much longer. Do you have any tips as to how I can break out of this? Thanks." Okay, well, thanks for sending in this question. So this is something, it's very, very common to experience this when we're dealing with any sort of kind of insomnia issues. And, fundamentally, this comes down to hyperarousal, just like so many other, um, all of insomnia issues. And we can get a little confused, depending on what it looks like, because sometimes we can have a hard time falling asleep. And other times it's more like what you're describing, where you're falling asleep really easily, but you're waking up much earlier than you actually want to, and you're having trouble falling back asleep. And oftentimes, this can just start off quite randomly with a completely random wake up, let's say 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and we don't think much of it because we do, it's very normal to wake up throughout the night. And then maybe at some point you woke up earlier in the morning and we don't want to be up at that time yet. And so it's really easy for us to get frustrated in the moment or to start to worry about, well, why am I not falling back asleep right now? And once we notice there's a little bit of time that's passed and we're still not falling back asleep, we're probably getting a little bit stressed about that. There's the pressure of knowing we have to wake up in an hour or two. So that's building. And pretty soon, we're having a full kind of stress response to being up early. And then all of a sudden it's happening the next night and it's happening the next night. And oftentimes it even happens around the exact same time. So let's say it's, 6 o'clock in the morning. And that feels even stranger. I keep popping awake at the same early time. What's going on? And I can't fall back asleep. And really, I think what's helpful is to think about what is happening for you mentally and emotionally when you're having these early wake ups. Think about what are some of the thoughts that are going through your mind. How are you feeling emotionally? Kind of what does that stress response look like? And because what tends to happen is once we start having a stress response, because we're up early, is the brain starts to think and associate that early time with something stressful happening. So, for example, let's say you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you have a stress response of some kind, the brain starts to think, there seems to be something happening at 6 o'clock in the morning that is a threat, that is dangerous, that he really needs to be awake for, to deal with and be aware of. And so the next morning, the brain's going to wake you up at 6 o'clock because the last 2 nights or the last 3 nights, you've been having a stress response at 6 o'clock. And so all of a sudden, you have a pattern that starts to grow where you're waking up pretty much at the same time all the time because your brain's trying to help you and keep you safe. But you don't know this. So the same stress response is kind of being activated, the same frustration or anger or pressure around sleep. And so without knowing, we inadvertently start to kind of reinforce and perpetuate this cycle. And we kind of inadvertently start to teach our brains that, yeah, 6 o'clock is a scary time to be awake. There's something happening here. And so then the more we do that, the more the cycle gets ingrained, the more we see it show up, and the more we start to worry about it. And so really what's helpful is that first step is notice when you wake up early and check in with what's going on with you. What is the mental and emotional response that's happening? And see if you can start to move that response away from stress, anxiety, fear, and more towards kind of noticing, observing, accepting, and kind of being okay with the fact that you're up early, knowing that it's a pattern that you can work on and reverse, and that it's okay. And so that was my first thought, and I want to pass it over to Beth because I know you've experienced this and you've heard this from a lot of people too. And what are some of your thoughts on this one?
Oh, you explained that so well. I enjoyed that. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can really add is that because it's happening on school days, that extra pressure around school. So, the brain has kind of developed this feeling of fear around being awake at this certain time, which has become a conditioned response. But it also could be helpful is looking at how you might be viewing school days. Is there anything around going to school, and maybe looking at a school day is just really another day, just like a weekend day. It's just got, it's just got school in it. So, there's something that the brain with that extra layer of pressure is viewing school. How is your brain? Where is it getting stuck on the school part of it? So that's another area I would consider.
That's a good point because he actually mentions in his message that this isn't happening on the weekends.
Right.
I think that's a really good tip off that it's absolutely part of the stress response that he's feeling because the moment the weekend comes, there's no real pressure around wake up time. If we wake up at 6 o'clock on a weekend, it's all right. We got plenty of time. We can sleep in if we want to. So I think that's, yeah, it really reinforces that this is really about that pressure and that anxiety and that fear. And that the first step, I think, is just knowing that and knowing that that's what's happening and that you can become aware of it in the moment and maybe do something to befriend being awake, help accept being awake at that time to teach your brain that it's actually safe and okay because it's convinced itself that it's not really safe and okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even befriending school days.
Yes.
Just befriending school, which might be a stretch for some people, but
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's such a good point. Like, how can you kind of reframe how you're feeling about needing to
yeah,
get up for school?
yeah,
And what can you do in the moment when you're actually up and you can't fall asleep?
yeah,
That is going to feel more safe and okay, as opposed to, getting stuck in that ruminating stress response where you're kind of like trying to fall asleep, but of course we can't force it. And the more we try, the
yeah,
less we're going to fall back asleep
yep,
anyway. So
exactly.
it's like we might as well just kind of surrender to the fact that we're up at that time, even if we don't
Right.
want to be, and see if we can, I want to say enjoy it, although that's not always possible to enjoy, but
Yeah,
um, can we just kind of let go and accept that, like, all right, this is happening right now, but this is a pattern I can reverse.
yeah,
And like Beth said, if you can embrace school or kind of
yeah,
check in with that mental part of it as well, because that's definitely part of it. If the weekends are so much better,
yeah, definitely.
for sure.
Oh,
Awesome. All right. So I hope that helped. We're going to move on to our next question. Our next question is from Alesha, and she says, I've listened to many of your videos and read Natto, full of great insights. Do you have any thoughts, suggestions, and how to respond when you hear someone else express how their day is absolutely terrible because they got little sleep? I understand I'm hypersensitive to it now because of my struggle with sleep. It feels a lot unfair when I'm learning it's important and necessary to let go of the importance of X amount of sleep equals a good day, or that it's possible to have a good day after little sleep. But then in the real world, everyone else gets away with that excuse, and it's widely accepted and empathized with. Oh, yeah, that's terrible. You couldn't fall asleep or only got 6 hours of sleep. You are totally validated that today is crap. I am a mom of several young kids, and I was talking with other young moms. One said how she needed to get out and have some TLC because she woke up at 4 and couldn't go back to sleep because of her kids. And another mom responded with, oh, that's so awful. Then I'm sitting there thinking, hey, who do you think you are? I regularly get way less than what you're complaining about, and I have to keep it to myself. I have to not complain to myself or others about it and have a smile on my face. It feels like the rules are different for me versus the rest of my world. That it's okay and it's acceptable for everyone else to equate the quality of their day with the amount or the quality of their sleep, but not for me. I don't know how to process this dilemma, and it comes up pretty frequently. People really like to talk about their sleep, and it's really flawed. I just never noticed it before I had the struggle. Any insights would be awesome. Thank you. Well, Alicia, I hear you. This is definitely a common issue, and you're right. People do like to talk about their sleep, and it is really flawed. And you're right. We notice it so much more when we're deep in our own struggle. So, Beth, when you hear Alicia's issue with this, what are some of the first thoughts that come to mind?
Well, first thought is I totally agree that it almost seems like a rite of passage in our culture to talk about sleep
Oh,
in
yeah.
a sort of negative way. I mean, it's
Mhm.
almost like a social norm, you know. I remember even as a young girl listening to my parents and grandparents talk about their sleep. It was never good. It was, it was never like, oh, I just feel so great and refreshed, and it was just wonderful, you know.
No one talks about it if it's good, right? No
Yeah,
one, no
yeah.
one's out bragging about how great their sleep is.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think it's this like cultural way that we commiserate together sometimes.
Totally.
And when your sleep story is completely different than what other people are talking about, automatically there's that sense of loneliness around that. and that you feel like, I remember feeling like insomnia was almost punishing, and feeling like this resentment when I would hear others talk about their sleep, and feeling like you just don't know how lucky you are that that's your sleep problem. Like, I wish I had that sleep problem.
Mhm. Me too.
Yeah, and so I really understand this question and this dilemma that you're running into a lot. And I think maybe the crux of this question is when you talked about having to keep it to yourself and not being able to complain and have a smile on your face. And I think that is really, really, I'm going to take a, you see, I saw you drink water, so I'm having a little drink of water.
Cheers.
Cheers. And I think that I think we can't force positivity in the same way that we can't force sleep. And when we try and like force that, having a smile on your face, and feel this sense that we are forced to be a certain way, we can run into some struggle there. That really creates a lot of struggle around our sleep. And I think that the way through this is to just honor that you are feeling these feelings, whatever they are, whether it's resentment or, it's just you're angry or whatever. It's just fully allow yourself to step into that feeling, whatever it is, and just authentically be with it. And I think that when we do that, it loses its charge a little bit. I mean, Michelle will tell you, I called her, what was it, like 5 nights ago? I was working on a project that I had a lot of emotions around. And I was feeling so much frustration and just angst. And I called and she wasn't available. I left this message and I said, I'm just so frustrated. I'm frustrated about this. I keep working on this. And, and I just laid it out. And I went back and worked on what I was working on. And all of a sudden it was there. It was there for me. It was there for me in a way because I allowed that I just allowed it to exist instead of resisting all the emotions I was feeling around it. So I really just giving yourself permission to feel your feelings and what you're going through around this, and a lot of self-compassion for yourself. And from that point, we're more able to then become an observer of what we're experiencing because we've already allowed it to happen and exist. And we can more pull away from it and not identify with it so much and not let it get the best of us and run away from us. And then even with time, direct ourselves in that more positive way that could be more helpful for you. But I think the first step is just allowing yourself to let yourself feel whatever you're feeling. And you talked about, you feel like the roles are different for you. And they are. And it's because you're holding on to knowledge that not many people have about sleep. Very few people know what you do about sleep. I mean, you literally are holding on to some cutting edge knowledge about how sleep works. And, you might even be amazed what an impact you can have on other folks when they're talking about sleep in this way. Like sometimes some of the knowledge, just planting a seed of what you know about sleep, can reframe it all for them. I've done that many, many times with people that may not necessarily have insomnia, but they're viewing sleep in ways that I'm like, that could turn into insomnia. So I'm going to plant this little seed of, of what you know. So your situation is a little different, but it might not be such a bad thing. And it could be for a purpose you might not even be aware of. So those are kind of my thoughts on that. How about you?
I love that last point. You said, yeah, it is different. You do have knowledge that other people don't have. Yeah. And I wonder if in those moments there could be this like sense of almost smiling to yourself and thinking, I know something here that you don't know.
Yeah.
Like I have this information kind of.
Yeah.
But I get it. I read this too, and my heart really goes out to you, Alesha, because kind of like Beth was saying, like we've all been through a version of this during our insomnia. And, it's part of insomnia is like, it's so lonely. It's such a lonely and isolating experience. And so, Alesha, when I was reading your message, what came really through to me is that to me, it's like more about what Beth was laying out here And then the other thought that I had was, if you look at the painful reaction that you are having to, these other people, look at what that painful reaction could be telling you about some of your own needs right now that could be unmet. So for example, if you're, you know, really frustrated that, they're getting this level of understanding or this empathy or this validation from complaining about their sleep, or talking about it in this way, I wonder if some of that pain is because you're going through this experience. Is very hard, and you could be maybe feeling the need to receive a little bit more connection and understanding and empathy and validation yourself that maybe you're not getting from anybody in your life right now. Which is very normal, because again, insomnia it's very isolating, and it can make us feel really alone. And just as human beings going through any type of experience, especially experiences that are difficult, we want to feel seen and we want to feel understood. And we crave that empathy and that understanding from people. And so it's very natural to kind of seek this out, or to have this need, especially during an experience like this. And it's hard to not have that need met in any way. And so I wonder if, when you're seeing these other people in your life kind of getting this through an avenue that you won't be helpful for you, if it's complaining about sleep, or, pegging the quality of your day according to your sleep, but there's still that unmet need. So that's really kind of what I was thinking about this as well, is and rather than feeling like bad or judging yourself for having any sort of these emotions, I wonder if you could look at it more as information about what your body or mind is telling you about maybe some of the needs that you might have that aren't being met. And maybe does that mean you could seek out a friend or a partner or a therapist or a sleep coach or anyone that could that could help meet some of these needs. Because speaking from my own experience, I didn't have anybody in my life that really understood what I was going through. I was lucky to have, people in my life that empathize and that could kind of provide some compassion, which was really nice, and that I could connect with. But that's hard to find. And I would have loved to have had like a sleep coach or a therapist who really understood, and that just wasn't part of my experience. So anyway, I encourage you to look at this as what are the underlying feelings and what is the pain telling you, and could you go out and kind of reach for some of that? Does that make sense, Beth? Is
Oh,
kind of
I love that you said, what is the pain? Yeah, I love what is the pain telling you? Because I'll often ask a client, if they had if they have kids, or if they have a dog or a cat or anything, and if they were going through this really difficult time, how would they help that? How would they help their child? And then give that same thing to yourself.
yes.
Just give that right to yourself. Listen, what is this pain telling me, or what is this saying to me? Just like a child would tell you, or your dog gets upset, or what are they telling you? And then soothe and nurture, and just offer that same thing to yourself. That very same thing.
I love that so much, because I feel like you just elevated that so much, because where I was going was, where can you seek and find that connection or those
Yeah.
needs? And I love that you just went to no, like, can you give that to yourself?
Yeah.
It's really powerful, right?
It is. It is. Yeah.
And empathy, maybe that's not something you're giving yourself lately, and that you can start giving yourself. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It's really beautiful. So Alesha, I hope that helps and gives you some, some layers to peel back on that reaction, because I think that there's more there for sure to look at. All right, let's move on to our next question. So our last question is from Amy, and she says, I've been dealing with insomnia for 5 years. Every night I have to take some sort of sleep aid, whether it's an over-the-counter sleep aid or anxiety pill or sleeping pill. If I don't take a pill of some sort, I don't sleep at all. Even with the pill, I hardly sleep, probably about 3 to 5 hours. It's a huge struggle for me in the mornings, as I have to be at work by 7:45. And when I'm at work, all I think about is sleep, because I'm so exhausted. I want to be able to go to sleep without having to take a pill every night. I've tried to set it and forget it multiple times. I've gone to bed not thinking of anything and ready to sleep. But as soon as I get in bed, my mind starts racing with different random things. And it's always stuff that makes no sense to me. It takes me forever to fall asleep, and I can wake up what feels like a dozen times. Can you please assist me in getting some advice? Thanks so much. Right. So thanks for sending in that question, Amy. This is so common that we hear this. And of course, insomnia is really when our brain learns fear around sleep and around being awake at night, and starts to become a really conditioned pattern. And then we start to experience it night after night. And I know you mentioned, even evenings where you're feeling fine, and then suddenly you'll go to bed and you can't sleep at all. And oftentimes, we call this the Houdini effect, actually, where you feel fine, even sleepy, and the moment you try to go to bed, you're wide awake, and that is that conditioned fear response going on in the mind, going on in the brain, and and it's going to result in that increased level of hyperarousal that you're experiencing, which is also showing up as shallow sleep, as waking up many times in the night and having those wake ups be more pronounced, not being able to sleep for long durations of time at all of it. So it really is all coming from hyperarousal, which is being caused by that conditioned fear response that your brain has learned around sleep. And so, luckily, just as your brain has learned fear around sleep, it can also equally unlearn this fear. And so, the first thing that we start to do is we want to educate ourselves on the fact that this is what insomnia is. It's really all about fear. It's really all about our anxiety around sleep. And one of the really great ways to start with this is to start to see if you can start to notice and really observe what your own mental and emotional reactions are when you go to bed at night, when you're up during the night, even when you're at work during the day. I think you mentioned, you're really thinking about sleep and worrying about sleep all day long as well. And so kind of tune into that a little bit more and see if you can drop into that observer role with yourself, where you're taking a step back and you're observing a lot of those thoughts and emotions, as opposed to getting really caught up in them or swept away in them. And once you start to know that this is about fear, how can you start showing up differently to what's happening? And I know that that's really difficult. So we start with kind of baby steps on this front. And one of the places to start is to ask yourself, how can you start reinforcing the fact that being awake at night, even though you don't want to be, even though it is unpleasant and uncomfortable and sometimes painful, how can you reinforce that you're still safe and it's still okay? And there are different ways to do this, and there's different ways to befriend wakefulness at night. And so, it could be getting up and doing something that you enjoy in the middle of the night when you're not able to sleep. It could be staying in bed and watching your favorite show, reading a book, anything that you might enjoy, doing a hobby that you really love, starting to bring things into the night that feel really good. And just knowing that, although it can be really hard to enjoy being awake at night, rather than if that's out of reach, really focus on how can I just make myself feel safe during this time, knowing that we want to start kind of coming away from that conditioned hyperarousal and fear response. And the other thing I wanted to mention, because you were talking about a lot about the medications that you need to take a sleeping pill or an anxiety pill, just something to be able to sleep. And my sense is that there's like some shame or some guilt around needing to take some sort of medication. When really, this is completely okay. A lot of people do this and it's all right. And but often we do feel a lot of shame around it. We feel as though it's something that we should not be doing. And the first thing to know is that no amount of, let's say, any sort of sleep aid that you can take actually is going to force or create sleep. So the sleep you're getting is sleep that your body is creating all on its own, which can be very comforting. And that it's also really helpful to view sleep aids as an act of self-care. and almost like you would think of it if you were taking like some sort of a vitamin during the day. And when we switch that perception, we can get rid of a lot of the inner conflict behind taking a medication and actually just see it as like, this is an act of self-care right now. I'm taking care of myself. I'm going to treat myself with this kindness. And then that helps reduce some of the hyperarousal and stress that we have around taking some of these types of sleep aids. So I'll pause there. Beth, what do you think when you read Amy's message and some of the she's struggling with?
So something that same thing, Michelle, that came forward for me is just this sensing this a bit of inner conflict around taking medication. And I get this too, because I took a lot of medication and I just felt this sense of just criticize myself, for taking it. And, the thing is that medication, whether we take it or not, really has no effect on your ability to recover from insomnia. And it really doesn't. And it's more what we want to do is just release that struggle around it, just remove that extra layer that we have around sleep in the having to take the medication. And I love like this idea of vitaminizing the medication.
I like that, vitaminizing.
Yeah, I mean, because we do not judge ourselves when we're taking supplements or vitamins or anything, and a lot of times it's a temporary measure. It's a little bridge to improve ourselves in some way, and that's all it is. And
exactly.
Yeah, so just let it, just that conflict, just looking at that conflict and giving yourself permission to just let that go, because you're dealing with enough. And the other thing that came forward was I think talking about thoughts, and that stuff that doesn't make sense, and it's random stuff, and I think this is something we do is we want to figure out what all these thoughts mean at night, when they're just random sentences in the brain that usually mean nothing at all. And it's the wanting to figure out what they mean and dissect and analyze them that further puts us into that hyper arousal. So when you have all these thoughts and you're like, this doesn't make any sense, and these thoughts, and that's okay. They're not really supposed to they don't have to make any sense at all. Just accepting that they won't, and that's okay. And you don't have to figure anything out around that at all.
Yeah. That's such a good point.
Yeah.
And it's really just these random thoughts being created by a brain that is unfortunately stuck in a fear pattern, right? Yeah. When we're stuck in that fear pattern, we're going to generate lots random, nonsensical, fear-based thoughts.
Yeah.
All the time.
And I think that when we do just allow those to exist, then we're able to then step into that observer role and just, not get as carried into them. So
yeah, absolutely. When you said vitaminize too, I thought that's so true. And not even are we okay with taking vitamins, we pat ourselves on the back, right? We're proud.
Right. Yeah.
Like, look at me today. Like, we're just like, look at me taking care of myself.
Yep.
And if we had that same attitude about taking a sleep aid,
yeah,
it would just change everything. We wouldn't have the inner conflict. It would be the opposite. We would feel this genuine, like almost like self-love.
Like doing what, taking care of ourselves and it's right. It's a matter of perspective.
Matter of perspective. And I think that's exactly the perfect way to put it, is when it comes to sleep medications, sleep aids of all kinds, it is a matter of perspective. And it helps so much. And the biggest thing to know is what Beth was mentioning about that inner conflict. It's all about the inner conflict when it comes to sleep aids. And as much as you can step away from that, the better, because that's just going to reduce stress and hyperarousal. And that's what we're looking to do with all this.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Amy, I hope that helps. As always, we love getting your questions. Feel free to chat in the comment section below if you have any follow-up for us. But that's it for today. So Beth, thanks so much for joining me again today.
Thanks for having me, Michelle. Always good to see you.
Of course. Yeah, no, same. We'll have to get you back on maybe in a couple weeks from now. We'll answer some more questions.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.